What's happening in the northern NSW coastal area of Byron Ballina, Australia? Byron Bay is a coastal town in NSW, Australia, with neighbouring towns of Lennox Head and Ballina. The area forms a popular and laid-back atmosphere for local communities and tourists alike. Today, skeletal remains have been found by police, and this will hopefully shed some light on at least one of the very strange disappearances in the area. The area has been popular with holidaymakers, and those wanting a coastal, country lifestyle, for generations. It features proximity to ideal beaches, trendy shops, hip bars, restaurants and lush countryside. Unfortunately, there is a significant drug issue in the area. The area has become internationally known over the last few years as the home to movie star Chris Hemsworth and his family, as he regularly posts to fans around the world on social media from Byron. An interesting dynamic occurring in this area, as a backdrop to these cases, is the juxtaposition of the moneyed folk from the city relocating and buying homes in the area, with hippies and coastal types who like the alternative lifestyle for which the area is famous. The cost of homes and accommodation in the Byron area has shifted markedly over the last decade or so, but it remains home to groups of homeless people who find that the good climate, bush setting, laid-back attitude of locals make for a bearable situation. Yet, a string of disappearances has started to loom large in the media. The media are now raising suggestions that these cases are somehow linked. Case 1. Theo Hayes, 19, disappeared on May 31, 2019. Theo was visiting the area from Belgium, when on a chilly autumn night he was asked to leave a local Byron bar and has not been seen again. He was captured on CCTV leaving the bar and walking in the opposite direction of his accommodation. Theo's phone showed he made some very unusual and almost inexplicable movements over the following few hours. It seems that someone knows something, because his actions only make sense if someone else was with him. The Lighthouse is an interesting podcast if you want to jump down the rabbit hole on Theo's disappearance. Note that the police are saying that the remains found today at Tallow Beach do not seem to be Theo's, even though speculation is rife as he was at Tallow Beach the night he disappeared. Perhaps the skeleton has female clothing, which is why they are saying it is not Theo in media releases today. Case 2. Thea Liddell, 42, disappeared October 31, 2019. Despite Thea leading a nomadic life, she seemed to stick with the northern coastal region of NSW, and the police seem to believe she hasn't just moved away. Thea was last seen in Mooball, Queensland, which is only 33 kilometers from Byron Bay, a frequent destination for Thea. Case 3. Ellen Wilson, 53, disappeared from Ballina on September 11, 2015. Ballina is a town very near to Byron, about 33 kilometers away. Ellen was captured on CCTV withdrawing cash from an ATM, then was scheduled to meet a friend. She never made that meeting. Both Ellen and her silver car are missing. Ellen has strong family and community connections and was not seen as someone at risk. Case 4. Bronwyn Windfield, 31, disappeared from Lennox Head on 16 May, 1993. A $100,000 reward is offered to anyone that provides police with information on Bronwyn, who disappeared from her Lennox Head home, some 21 kilometers from Byron. Bronwyn was last seen in her home and leaves behind 2 children. It is interesting that police are offering this substantial reward and say she met with foul play. It hints that there was something at the scene that they have not released to the public, which gives them that impression. Each of these cases have left police baffled. Although there is some geography between the cases, in Australian terms the cases are close to each other. Police and volunteers are regularly searching for these missing people, and today those efforts might have yielded some information for at least one of the families affected by the above disappearances. Do you think these could be linked? What could be going on in this idyllic area? Approximately 80% of adults who go missing are known to have some form of mental illness at the time. Their cases are often overlooked and forgotten due to their mental health. I found 3 cases of missing persons sufferings from schizophrenia with little information and media coverage that I want to share. Researching cases in upstate New York has opened me up to multiple cases involving adults who suffer from a schizophrenia that have vanished, with so little information and seem to have been forgotten over time. These individuals are all older adults who suffer from a debilitating mental illness when they're not medicated. It's not a sexy story with lots of twists and turns, but it's just as important. I think it's very easy to disregard these persons as being crazy and having a "what did you expect" attitude. These people are someone's loved one. They aren't a menace or nuisance to society. All of these people could be living amongst the homeless, could be hospitalized somewhere anonymously, or could be a John/Jane Doe. I don't have much detail on these people individually, so I'm compiling a few cases in this post of their disappearances in a way to hopefully get their name out there more and also start a discussion on this topic, which I would love to get some different takes on. What is your take on missing persons with mental illnesses? How do you think we can better find or protect these individuals? Do you know of any other cases similar to these? Sharon Ann Ross. Sharon Ann Ross was last seen on October 10, 2013. Near her home at Olympic Apartments in the 200 block of Franklin Street in Watertown, New York. She was 57 years old at the time, and suffered from schizophrenia. She left all of her belongings behind in her apartment and has never been seen again. There is no clue or indication of where she went from the search of her apartment. Her cousin, Irene Lavancha, was interviewed 2 years after Sharon's disappearance. Sharon, by now, may not even know who she is. "It's been over 2 years without medicine," said Lavancha. "When her mother passed away, I promised her mother I would look out for her, but I can't do that if she's not here." No new information has ever come out in her case since she vanished almost 7 years ago. Sharon is not medicated for her schizophrenia. If she's out there, she's classified as endangered missing. Sharon would currently be 63 years old, her height is 4'11" and was around 120 pounds at the time of her disappearance. She's Caucasian with gray hair and hazel eyes. Any information on her case can be called into the Watertown Police Department /315-786-2610. Conrad Marcano Rivera. Conrad Marcano Rivera was last seen in Monticello/Liberty, New York on January 2, 2017. Conrad suffers from schizophrenia and may not even realize is he missing or who he is. He is a vulnerable adult in need of medication. It's stated that he is a hard worker and his family believes he may be or has worked for cash as being a day laborer in the area. He has always kept in touch with his mother, which makes his family think he does not have a phone or has forgotten their contact information or his own identity. He was 48 years old at the time of his disappearance, November 14, 1968. His height is between 5'9" to 6'0" and has a weight fluctuation between 180 to 240 pounds. He is Hispanic with brown hair and brown eyes. His nickname is Mark. Whatever happened to Tiffany? Lastly, we have D. Capacity of process works, projects or plant rated capacity. This capacity can be defined as the total kilowatt ratings of all engines, motors, boilers, turbines, or other prime movers installed. An unprecedented and sophisticated attack on an electric grid substation. Why did a mysterious group of people shoot at and knock out a power station just south of San Jose in 2013? It's April 16, 2013. Yesterday across the country in Boston, a bomb went off at a marathon, and that is still dominating the headlines. But we aren't in Boston. We're in Santa Clara County, California, not far from the border of San Jose. It's quiet. It usually is at this time of night, just a few ticks shy of 1 in the morning. The Metcalf Power Station is partially responsible for powering Silicon Valley and stands unguarded. Someone slips into an underground vault, and with a few clips, cuts a fiber optic cable. The immediate effect of this is felt a few minutes later, when the internet of a few locals shutters off, much to their annoyance. But the real effect of what was just done will not be felt until 30 minutes later. It's quiet again. A flash, in hindsight a signal, lights up the night. The roar of gunfire rips through the station. A few cameras pick up the sparks as bullets careen off the metal fence, but the shooters are not captured on film. That fiber optic cable would send out an alert, but the signal dies where the cut was made. The bank of transformers doesn't last that long. Later the engineers would comment on how precise the shots were, not only because they were hitting the thinnest parts of the coolant fins, but because striking this particular target meant that there wouldn't be an explosion or a fire. Nearby, a worker at another plant calls 911, reporting gunfire. A few minutes after that, the energy company's control center receives an equipment failure alarm. Another flash of light cuts through the bursts of gunfire. More than 100 shell casings lay on the ground, silent witnesses to the destruction of property that just took place. Less than a minute after the attack ceases, police officers arrive. Less than an hour passes from when the cables were sliced through to when the gunfire stops. They don't see anything suspicious outside, and they can't get into the locked gate. They don't see anything suspicious outside, and they can't get into the locked gate. An hour and some change after the police arrive, an engineer from the electric company pulls up and starts to assess the carnage. Because workers were able to shunt electricity from other power stations, there wasn't any downtime. The people of San Jose, and the greater Silicon Valley area, didn't have their power go out. One of the reasons that this is so scary is because this could happen anywhere. A lot of important components sit out in the open with little protection other than cameras and chain link fences. If a wide-scale attack were to take place, the US power grid would be under severe strain for a while, should it even remain online. According to the general manager of Pennsylvania Transformer, they can only build 10 units a month. These components are custom and hard to move around. The Federal Energy Regulatory Commission commissioned a study, where they found that a surprisingly small number of these substations would have to be taken out to plunge most of the US into darkness. Let us turn our attention to what we know about who perpetrated these attacks. Experts from the Joint Warfare Analysis Center told the FERC that it looked like a professional attack. When the FBI examined the shell casings, they did not find any fingerprints. When the police searched the area, they found several piles of rocks placed 25 meters apart from each other, as if to gauge the distance for shooters and point out the best spots. When authorities checked the tapes, they didn't find a shred of evidence that they could use, indicating that the attackers knew where the cameras were and where they were pointing. There is no confirmed number of attackers. Most experts suggest that it was between 2 to 4. Who they are and what they wanted is unknown. The power company, PG&E, put out a statement ascribing the attack to simple vandalism. This suggestion is downright bizarre, as this attack required a considerable amount of planning, resources, and know-how to pull off. In February of 2014, the FBI was investigating the attack and did not believe that it was the work of a terrorist group. No one has claimed credit for the incident. In November of 2012, the National Research Council released a report that suggested that the electric power grid is inherently vulnerable to terrorist attacks. Whether the attackers used the information in the report is likely, but unknown. When it comes to suspects, there isn't much. Some have pointed to geopolitical enemies of the United States as the culprits. The basic reasoning behind this would be to do a dry run for an actual attack so that when a war starts they can knock out power for most of the population of the US. I found this doubtful. If there were a war, both sides would lob nuclear weapons, and that would be it. This eliminates bigger enemies, such as China and Russia, but it leaves wiggle room for countries that would fight asymmetrically, such as Iran. A senior official at the Department of Homeland Security believes that it is an insider. This is something that I find convincing. The attackers knew exactly what to do. This leaves us the responsibility to find a motive. While it is possible that a disgruntled ex-employee would attack their former employer, I find it incredibly implausible that at least one other person would go along with this kamisado. If you are willing to follow me into conspiracy theory territory, please consider the following. PG&E pledged to spend $100 million on security in the aftermath of the attack. Someone who knew about the electricity grid could have easily paid a mercenary company that was coming back from Iraq or Afghanistan. One night later, and you have yourself a hefty contract. Between 1999 and 2006, terrorist organizations were linked to 2,500 attacks on transmission lines or towers and 500 attacks on substations across the world. While instances of this magnitude are exceptionally rare, there were 274 significant cases of vandalism or deliberate damage between 2010 and 2013 in the United States. The mark against this is the fact that if the plan is sniffed out, the perpetrators are looking at a lot of jail time. Putting together such an assault while also keeping everyone quiet seems too difficult to me. This case doesn't end there, however. A month after the attack, security guards spotted a person dressed in all black fewer than 100 meters from the site. This was around 3 in the morning. They called the police, but the man disappeared before he could be apprehended. In November of 2013, authorities simulated an attack on the power grid. This included both cyber warfare and imitation bombings on electric facilities. The results of the test were a complete disaster, and the study found that knocking out America's power grid was surprisingly easy. The report detailed the exact ways that the grid was vulnerable in a few different areas. A copy of this report found its way to the Metcalfe Power Station. 8 months after the sniper attack, the station was broken into. The thief got away with power tools, a pipe bender, and a copy of the report. There are a few questions that stand out to me about the incident, as well as a few other situations. When the equipment failed, an alarm was triggered to PG&E. How did the alarm get to them if they cut the cable? Was that alarm wireless in some capacity? If that is the case, how much of an insider can they be if they can't jam Wi-Fi and didn't know that the alarm was going to get out? What would someone have to gain by knocking out a power station? Ultimately, no one's power went out. So denying one specific person or company power didn't happen. An insider would likely know the capabilities of other power stations, and if they were interested in killing power they would not do this. No ransom letter was delivered. This means monetary gain is unlikely. Most power companies have monopolies, and even if they didn't, this would be an awfully bold move for a competitor. Another line of questioning concerns the police. There was a flash of light, and the attack stopped. Less than a minute later, the police arrived. They didn't find anything, so they turned around. If the police were less than a minute away, wouldn't they have heard the gunfire? If not, were they using something to suppress the noise? And how would the guy nearby hear the gunfire, but the police didn't? Some people have pointed out the fact that the shooting stopped fewer than 60 seconds before the police showed up to suggest that they were listening in on what the police were doing. Do we know that to be the case? Could it be a coincidence? Or could they have had a scout on the road that radioed the arrival of the police in? Furthermore, is the person who showed up a month later related? What were they looking for, if so? If someone was on the inside, they would already know what security there would be, unless they weren't on the inside anymore? On this trend, is the theft 8 months later related? They grabbed some things that weren't related to security, although this would be a good cover to nab the report. Curiously, the Santa Clara County Sheriff Lori Smith informed reporters that her officers did not find piles of rocks 25 meters apart, as was originally suggested. This would be a mark against the professionalism of the shooters. It is also possible that this is a mistake. Missing a pile of rocks seems trivially easy, just as it might be possible, if terribly unlikely, that such a thing could happen naturally. And if it is not a mistake, who is lying about it and why? Finally, and this is really speculative, but in 2015 there were 11 attacks on Bay Area internet lines. Some of these attacks happened simultaneously. Internet services were severed in nearby Sacramento. The motives for this attack are also unknown. They could be related, but I'm leaning against it.